The clatter of silverware against ceramic plates filled our dining room as I served Michael's favorite lasagna, the same recipe I'd perfected over 37 years of marriage. Steam rose from the bubbling cheese, carrying the aroma of oregano and garlic through the air. My 68-year-old hands moved with practiced precision, portioning generous squares onto each plate. Michael, my 34-year-old son, scrolled through his phone while his wife Sarah fed baby Emma in her high chair. The mahogany table, a wedding gift from my late husband's parents, reflected the warm glow of our chandelier. I'd been planning to share my exciting news about the travel photography contest I'd entered, but something in Michael's distant expression made me hesitate. The contest announcement sat folded in my apron pocket, waiting for the right moment. Little did I know this dinner would change everything between us forever. Subscribe and comment your city if you've ever felt underestimated by family. I placed the steaming plates before them, watching Michael finally look up from his device. The familiar scent of home-cooked comfort food usually brought us together, but tonight felt different. Sarah smiled gratefully as I handed her a napkin for Emma's messy fingers. My grandson Tommy, 6 years old, chattered excitedly about his school art project, his voice cutting through the tension I couldn't quite place. The dining room's family photos watched over us. Decades of birthdays, graduations, holidays captured in silver frames. I'd taken most of those pictures myself, back when my photography was just a hobby. The camera equipment upstairs had been gathering dust since Robert died 2 years ago. Tonight, I'd planned to announce my return to the passion that once defined me. But Michael's preoccupied demeanor suggested this conversation might not go as smoothly as I'd hoped. The folded contest papers seemed to grow heavier in my pocket. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances," Michael announced suddenly, setting down his fork with deliberate precision. His tone carried that same authoritative edge he used in boardroom meetings, the one that had earned him a corner office at 32. Sarah shot him a warning look, but he continued anyway. The warmth drained from my chest as I recognized this wasn't going to be the celebratory dinner I'd envisioned. My Social Security statements were stacked neatly on the kitchen counter, along with Dad's life insurance paperwork and my modest savings account records. I'd been organizing everything for my upcoming adventure, not realizing Michael had been scrutinizing my financial situation. Emma gurgled happily, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. Tommy continued drawing dinosaurs on his napkin, his innocent concentration a stark contrast to the storm brewing across our dinner table. Something told me my travel photography dreams were about to face their biggest challenge yet. "I've been reviewing your expenses and frankly, I'm concerned about your spending habits," Michael continued, pulling out a manila folder from his briefcase. The official papers rustled as he spread them across the table, displacing the cheerful placemats I'd sewn last spring. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, bouncing Emma, who had started to fuss. My heart hammered against my ribs as I saw my bank statements, credit card bills, and purchase records laid out like evidence in a trial. The $8,000 I'd saved from selling Robert's vintage car collection was clearly circled in red ink. Next to it, Michael had itemized my recent purchases: camera lens, tripod, travel guides, passport renewal. His neat handwriting documented every transaction with forensic precision. Tommy looked up from his dinosaur drawing, sensing the change in atmosphere. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my privacy had been systematically invaded. The contest entry fee of $50 was highlighted in yellow, labeled as frivolous expense in Michael's distinctive script. "You spent $1,200 on camera equipment last month," Michael stated, tapping the receipt with his index finger. His wedding ring caught the light, reminding me of the day I'd helped him choose it, back when he valued my opinions. The Canon lens I'd purchased sat upstairs in its case, representing months of careful budgeting and dreams of capturing landscapes I'd only seen in magazines. Sarah cleared her throat softly, attempting to redirect the conversation, but Michael's momentum was unstoppable. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in as my son dissected my financial choices with clinical detachment. I remembered teaching him to balance a checkbook when he was 16, proud of his mathematical aptitude. Now that same skill was being weaponized against me. Emma threw her sippy cup on the floor, the plastic clatter emphasizing the awkward silence that followed Michael's accusation. My appetite vanished completely as I realized this wasn't concern. It was control disguised as care. "Michael, perhaps we should discuss this privately later," Sarah suggested diplomatically, her voice barely above a whisper. She'd always been the peacekeeper in our family, smoothing over conflicts with gentle redirection. But Michael's jaw was set in that stubborn line I remembered from his teenage years, when he'd argued politics at family gatherings with the same unwavering certainty. The lasagna grew cold on our plates as the conversation took a decidedly uncomfortable turn. Tommy had abandoned his drawing to listen, his 6-year-old eyes wide with confusion. I wanted to protect him from witnessing this adult disagreement, but felt paralyzed by the weight of Michael's financial documents spread before me. The contest announcement in my pocket felt like contraband now, a guilty secret I couldn't possibly share. The chandelier's warm light seemed harsher somehow, illuminating my son's disapproving expression with unflattering clarity. Every dollar I'd spent pursuing my rekindled passion was being questioned, judged, found wanting. The room held its breath, waiting for my response to charges I didn't know I was facing. "At your age, Mom, you need to be more practical about money," Michael pressed on, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my teeth clench. The phrase "at your age" hung in the air like an accusation, reducing my 68 years to nothing but a liability. I thought about the photography classes I'd taken at the community center, surrounded by people who celebrated creativity regardless of their birth year. The instructor, Margaret, was 73 and had just published her first coffee table book. Age had never felt like a limitation until this moment, sitting across from my own son, who seemed to view my years as evidence of declining judgment. Sarah reached across to squeeze my hand briefly, her touch warm and reassuring. Emma babbled contentedly, her innocent sounds a stark contrast to the tension permeating our family dinner. The travel brochures hidden in my bedroom drawer suddenly felt foolish, naive dreams of an old woman who should know better. Michael's financial spreadsheets reduced my hopes to mere numbers, line items in a budget that apparently required his approval. "I've been thinking you should consider assisted living," Michael announced, the words hitting me like a physical blow. The carefully calculated statement had clearly been rehearsed, probably discussed between him and Sarah during their private conversations about my future. My fork clattered against the plate as my hand trembled with shock and indignation. Assisted living at 68, when I hiked 3 miles every morning and maintained my own home with meticulous care. The very suggestion felt like a betrayal of everything I'd taught him about independence and self-reliance. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment, and she mouthed, "Sorry," across the table, while Michael continued outlining his plans for my life. Tommy had gone completely quiet, sensing the gravity of the conversation even if he didn't understand the implications. The dining room that had hosted 34 years of family celebrations suddenly felt like a courtroom where I was being sentenced without trial. My son's concern felt more like a coup, a systematic dismantling of my autonomy disguised as love. "The Sunrise Manor has excellent amenities," Michael continued, producing a glossy brochure from his briefcase. The facility's marketing materials showed smiling elderly residents engaged in supervised activities, gentle water aerobics, seated crafts, group sing-alongs. The images depicted a sanitized version of aging that bore no resemblance to my vibrant, adventurous spirit. I studied the pamphlet's photos of sterile hallways and shared dining rooms, trying to imagine myself shuffling through those corridors in house slippers. The monthly fee of $4,800 was highlighted in Michael's efficient handwriting, along with notes about security and medical supervision. Sarah had stopped eating entirely, her discomfort palpable as she witnessed her husband's systematic dismantling of my independence. Emma reached for my glasses, her tiny fingers grasping at the familiar frames she associated with grandmother cuddles and story time. The contrast between her innocent affection and Michael's cold calculation broke something inside me. My dreams of travel photography suddenly seemed not just impractical, but impossible under the weight of his expectations. "You're being ridiculous, Michael." I finally found my voice, setting down my napkin with deliberate calm. The words emerged steadier than I felt, though my heart was racing with a mixture of hurt and defiance. My son's eyebrows shot up in surprise at my resistance to his carefully orchestrated intervention. Sarah nodded almost imperceptibly, her support subtle but unmistakable. Tommy resumed his dinosaur drawing with renewed concentration, perhaps sensing that Grandma was fighting back against some unnamed threat. The dining room's familiar warmth felt like armor now, surrounding me with decades of memories that Michael's spreadsheets couldn't quantify. I thought about Robert's last words, encouraging me to live fully and chase the dreams we'd postponed together. The photography contest announcement in my pocket suddenly felt less like contraband and more like a declaration of war. Michael's expression hardened, clearly unprepared for opposition to his logical, well-researched plan for my future. The battle lines were drawn across our mahogany dinner table, with Emma's innocent babbling providing the only sound of joy in an increasingly tense standoff. "I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. The financial documents scattered across the table represented Michael's version of caring, but they felt like shackles designed to limit my remaining years to safe, supervised mediocrity. I pulled the contest announcement from my apron pocket, smoothing the creased paper with hands that no longer trembled. The International Travel Photography Competition, organized by a prestigious global magazine, promised adventure, recognition, and validation that age was irrelevant to artistic vision. Michael's eyes widened as he read the header, his disapproval immediate and unmistakable. Sarah leaned forward with genuine interest, the first person tonight who seemed excited rather than concerned about my plans. Tommy abandoned his drawing to examine the colorful brochure featuring stunning landscape photographs from around the world. The dining room suddenly felt electric with possibility, as if my hidden dreams were finally demanding space at our family table. Michael's carefully constructed argument was about to face its first real challenge. A photography contest? Michael's tone dripped with condescension, as if I'd announced plans to join the circus. He examined the entry form with the same skeptical scrutiny he'd applied to my bank statements, searching for evidence of my supposed declining judgment. The contest's grand prize of $25,000 and a featured spread in one of the world's most prestigious travel magazines seemed to personally offend his sensibilities. Sarah reached for the brochure with genuine enthusiasm, her marketing background immediately recognizing the prestige of the publication. Emma clapped her hands at the colorful images, pointing excitedly at a photograph of mountain peaks reflected in crystal-clear water. Tommy declared the pictures super cool, his 6-year-old appreciation uncomplicated by adult cynicism. Michael's disapproval cast a shadow over their innocent excitement, his protective instincts morphing into something that felt increasingly like control. The contest deadline was 3 weeks away, requiring travel to capture original photographs in locations I'd only dreamed of visiting. My son's expression suggested he'd rather fund my funeral than my artistic ambitions. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Michael gestured at the contest materials, as if they were evidence of my mental decline. His voice carried the same tone he used when explaining complex concepts to difficult clients, patient, but ultimately dismissive. The implication that my artistic aspirations were symptoms of aging delusion stung worse than any direct insult. Sarah shot him another warning look, but Michael seemed oblivious to her disapproval, focused entirely on dismantling what he viewed as dangerous fantasy. I thought about the photography workshops I'd attended, surrounded by people who understood that creativity had no expiration date. Margaret's wrinkled hands had captured images that moved viewers to tears, her 73-year-old perspective enriching rather than limiting her artistic vision. Tommy traced the contest photographs with his finger, unconsciously supporting my dreams while his father systematically destroyed them. The dining room felt like a battleground where my future hung in the balance, decided by a jury of one who'd already reached his verdict. The taste of cold lasagna turned bitter in my mouth as I realized this dinner had been an ambush disguised as family time. "You're too old to be gallivanting around the world with a camera," Michael declared, his words landing like a final judgment. The phrase "too old" echoed in my ears, reducing 68 years of experience, wisdom, and capability to nothing but a liability. I thought about Ansel Adams, who photographed Yosemite well into his 80s, his aged eyes capturing beauty that younger photographers missed entirely. The contest announcement trembled in my hands, not from weakness, but from the rage building in my chest at being dismissed so casually. Sarah's face had gone pale with embarrassment at her husband's blunt cruelty, while Tommy continued admiring the photographs with unfiltered wonder. Emma reached for me across her high chair, her tiny arms offering comfort that her father couldn't provide. The dining room's family photos seemed to mock me now, decades of captured moments that apparently meant nothing if they couldn't prove my current worth to my own son. Michael's certainty was absolute, unshakable, infuriating in its paternalistic authority. The travel dreams I'd nurtured since Robert's death were being systematically executed at my own dinner table. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled only with Emma's contented babbling and the tick of the antique clock Robert had restored during our early marriage. Tommy had resumed his dinosaur drawing, his young mind probably unable to fully process the adult cruelty unfolding around him. Sarah cleared her throat delicately, searching for words that might bridge the growing divide between mother-in-law and husband. Michael's financial documents remained spread across the table like evidence in a trial where I was both defendant and victim, my spending habits dissected with prosecutorial precision. The contest brochure felt heavier in my hands, weighted with dreams that my son considered foolish indulgences. My appetite had vanished completely, replaced by a burning determination that surprised me with its intensity. The warm lasagna grew cold, while my resolve heated to a temperature that would have frightened my grieving self from 2 years ago. Michael's patronizing smile suggested he considered the matter settled, my protests merely the last gasps of an old woman's delusion. He had no idea he'd just lit a fuse that would explode his assumptions about his aging mother. "I think we should call it a night," Sarah suggested gently, beginning to gather Emma's scattered toys and sippy cups. Her diplomatic retreat felt like abandonment, though I understood her position as the family peacekeeper trying to prevent further damage. Michael nodded approvingly, clearly satisfied with his intervention's apparent success in bringing me to my senses. Tommy reluctantly put away his crayons, shooting me a sympathetic look that suggested he didn't fully understand the conversation but knew Grandma was upset. The dining room began returning to normal as plates were cleared and the evidence of our family dinner disappeared, but the emotional wreckage remained scattered across my heart. I folded the contest announcement carefully, tucking it back into my apron pocket, where it pulsed like a heartbeat against my ribs. Michael's financial documents disappeared into his briefcase with bureaucratic efficiency, his case against my independence apparently closed. The antique clock continued its steady rhythm, marking time that my son seemed to believe I no longer had the right to spend freely. But something had awakened in me during this confrontation, something that refused to accept his verdict. I watched them prepare to leave, Michael's self-satisfied expression particularly galling as he helped Sarah bundle Emma into her car seat carrier. The baby's innocent smile pierced my heart as I realized how Michael's attitude might shape her understanding of aging and possibility. Tommy hugged my legs goodbye, whispering, "I liked your pictures, Grandma, with the uncomplicated support that children offer so naturally." Sarah embraced me warmly, her whispered, "Don't give up," carrying more weight than her husband's entire financial presentation. The front door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the quiet house, leaving me alone with the ruins of my family dinner and the burning certainty that something had to change. The contest brochure called to me from my apron pocket, its deadline suddenly feeling less like pressure and more like liberation. Michael's pronouncement that I was too old had awakened a rebellious spirit I'd thought died with Robert. The dining room's empty silence filled with possibility as I began planning the most important journey of my life. Tomorrow, I would prove that age was just a number, and dreams had no expiration date. The morning sun streamed through my bedroom curtains as I spread the contest materials across my quilted bedspread, studying each requirement with the methodical attention I'd once applied to raising children and managing a household. The entry deadline loomed exactly 21 days away, requiring original photographs from international locations that captured the spirit of adventure through cultural connection. My passport, renewed just 3 months ago, despite Michael's skeptical comments about unnecessary expenses, lay ready beside my laptop. The $8,000 from Robert's car collection could fund a modest but meaningful journey to capture images that would silence my son's patronizing concerns about my capabilities. I pulled up airline websites, comparing routes to destinations that had lived in my travel journals for decades. The temples of Angkor Wat, the northern lights in Iceland, the ancient streets of Prague. Each possibility carried the weight of postponed dreams, finally demanding attention. The camera equipment Michael had criticized yesterday suddenly felt like tools of rebellion rather than foolish purchases. My fingers traced the contest's grand prize description: $25,000 and a featured spread in a globally renowned travel magazine, validation that would prove age was irrelevant to artistic vision. The phone rang at 7:30, Michael's name appearing on the caller ID with predictable punctuality. His voice carried that same patronizing tone from dinner, checking to ensure his intervention had achieved the desired result of bringing his mother to her senses. "I hope you've reconsidered that contest idea, Mom," he began without preamble, his certainty about my compliance, both infuriating and motivating. I let him speak while booking a flight to Prague online, the cursor hovering over the purchase button as he outlined his concerns about elderly women traveling alone. The irony wasn't lost on me that my son, who'd learned independence and critical thinking at my kitchen table, was now trying to limit the very qualities I'd instilled in him. Sarah's voice murmured in the background, probably urging restraint, but Michael continued his lecture about practical limitations and age-appropriate activities. The flight confirmation screen awaited my final click, a digital line in the sand that would transform his theoretical concerns into my concrete reality. His patronizing advice about settling into a quieter phase of life provided the final motivation I needed. I clicked purchase and smiled as the confirmation email arrived in my inbox. "Actually, Michael, I've made some decisions about my future," I interrupted his monologue, savoring the surprise in his momentary silence. The flight confirmation glowed on my laptop screen like a small victory flag, the first of many battles I intended to win in this war for my independence. Prague's morning departure was scheduled for tomorrow, giving me exactly 24 hours to prepare for the journey that would define the rest of my life. Michael's voice sharpened with alarm as I described my travel plans, his protective instincts shifting into overdrive at the thought of his aging mother navigating international airports and foreign cities alone. The contest's 3-week time frame would allow for careful exploration and thoughtful composition, plenty of time to capture images that would showcase both technical skill and artistic vision. I could almost hear his blood pressure rising through the phone connection as the reality of my rebellion began to sink in. Sarah's excited whisper of "good for her" carried clearly through the background noise, a bright spot of support in my son's storm of objections. The house felt different already, charged with possibility and purpose that had been dormant since Robert's death. "You can't be serious about traveling to Europe alone," Michael protested, his voice rising with each word as parental concern transformed into barely controlled panic. The safety statistics he began reciting sounded rehearsed, probably researched during his commute to support arguments he'd planned to use in future interventions. I listened patiently while packing my camera bag with lenses, memory cards, and backup batteries, each item representing preparation rather than impulse. The travel insurance policy I'd purchased online provided coverage that exceeded his dire predictions about foreign healthcare costs and emergency evacuations. Margaret from my photography class had traveled solo through Southeast Asia at 75, returning with stories and images that put younger photographers to shame. Michael's litany of potential disasters revealed more about his anxieties than my actual capabilities, his imagination conjuring scenarios that had never materialized during my decades of competent adulthood. The printed boarding pass emerged from my printer like a declaration of independence, tangible proof that his pronouncements about my limitations carried no legal weight. Prague's ancient streets awaited my footsteps and my camera, indifferent to my son's concerns about appropriateness. "I've already booked the flight," I announced, cutting through his increasingly frantic objections with calm finality. The silence that followed was profound, stretching across phone lines and generational assumptions until Michael found his voice again. His spluttering attempts to formulate arguments grew more desperate as the reality of my decisive action overwhelmed his careful plans for managing my decline. The boarding pass lay before me like evidence of my competence, a direct contradiction to his narrative about aging mothers who needed supervised activities and assisted living arrangements. Sarah's delighted laughter echoed in the background, her marketing instincts probably recognizing the brilliant strategy of proving capability through action rather than argument. Michael's voice cracked slightly as he shifted from dismissive authority to genuine worry, the first indication that his concern might contain actual love beneath the patronizing control. My suitcase gaped open on the bed, ready to hold clothes that would accompany me to locations my son considered impossible for someone my age. The contest deadline had transformed from pressure into possibility, each remaining day a gift to be unwrapped in foreign cities. The conversation devolved into Michael's increasingly desperate attempts to convince me that international travel was dangerous for elderly women, his arguments revealing assumptions about aging that would have been insulting if they weren't so absurd. I continued packing while he enumerated potential disasters, language barriers, pickpockets, medical emergencies, transportation confusion, all delivered with the certainty of someone who'd never actually experienced solo travel. The passport in my carry-on bag had already stamped 3 countries during my marriage to Robert, memories of adventures that predated Michael's birth by several years. Margaret's travel blog provided real-time proof that septuagenarians successfully navigated foreign cities daily, their experiences enriched rather than limited by accumulated wisdom. Michael's protective instincts had transformed into something resembling imprisonment, his love expressed through limitations that felt more like chains than care. The camera battery charged quietly on my nightstand, preparing for the thousands of images I planned to capture over the next 3 weeks. Prague's golden spires beckoned from my travel guidebook, promising photographic opportunities that would silence skeptics and validate dreams. My son's voice continued its worried cadence, but his words had lost their power to influence decisions I'd already committed to making. "Mom, please be reasonable," Michael pleaded, his tone shifting from authority to supplication as he realized his usual tactics were failing catastrophically. The word reasonable had become code for accepting limitations I'd never agreed to embrace, surrendering dreams to practicality that served his comfort more than my happiness. I zipped my suitcase with deliberate finality, the sound carrying clearly through our phone connection, like punctuation on a conversation that was fundamentally changing our relationship. The contest guidelines promised judging based purely on artistic merit and technical excellence, criteria that had nothing to do with the photographer's birth year or family approval ratings. Michael's breathing grew heavier as he contemplated the implications of his mother's rebellion, his carefully constructed plans for my future, crumbling with each decision I made independently. Sarah's voice carried encouragement from the background, her words too quiet to understand, but clearly supportive of my sudden transformation from compliant mother to determined adventurer. The travel insurance confirmation email arrived with perfect timing, another piece of evidence that I'd planned this journey with the same careful attention to detail that had managed our household for decades. Prague's weather forecast promised 3 weeks of perfect autumn light, ideal conditions for the photographs that would prove my capabilities to skeptical sons and dismissive societies. The argument continued for another 20 minutes, Michael cycling through various strategies to change my mind while I methodically prepared for departure. His appeals to logic, emotion, and family responsibility bounced off my newly armored determination like raindrops on a windshield. The contest entry form lay completed on my desk, requiring only photographs and a brief artist's statement to transform dreams into concrete competition. Michael's voice grew hoarse from repeating the same objections, his usual persuasive powers rendered impotent by my simple refusal to be persuaded. I double-checked my camera settings while he described the assisted living facility's safety measures. The irony apparently lost on him that I was demonstrating exactly the kind of independent thinking he claimed I'd lost. Sarah's increasingly audible support provided a soundtrack of female solidarity, her whispered, "You go girl" moments perfectly timed to counteract her husband's negativity. The taxi confirmation arrived via text message, my ride to the airport scheduled for 6 a.m. sharp, 3 hours before Michael typically began his morning routine. By the time he awakened tomorrow, I'd already be somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, proving that age was no barrier to adventure. Finally, mercifully, the conversation ended with Michael's defeated promise to discuss this further when you come to your senses. The phrase stung because it revealed how little he understood about the woman who'd raised him to think independently and pursue his dreams without limitation. I set the phone aside and surveyed my packed luggage, camera equipment, travel documents, and printed itineraries with deep satisfaction. The house felt different, without the weight of his disapproval pressing against my plans, lighter somehow, as if permission I'd never needed had finally been officially withdrawn. Margaret's evening text message provided perfect timing. Safe travels. Can't wait to see what magic you capture. The photography community understood what family members sometimes missed, that creativity and adventure had no expiration date, no age limit, no requirement for anyone's approval except the dreamer's own courage. Prague's ancient stones had weathered centuries of visitors, indifferent to their ages, nationalities, or family members' opinions about appropriate activities. Tomorrow morning would begin the journey that would either vindicate my rebellion or provide Michael with permanent ammunition for future interventions. Either way, I'd chosen action over safety, dreams over practicality, independence over supervised decline. The alarm clock's shrill cry at 4 a.m. felt like a battle reveille, summoning me to the war I'd declared against my son's expectations and society's assumptions about aging gracefully. I moved through my morning routine with military precision, decades of early rising for family obligations, now serving my personal rebellion. The taxi's headlights cut through pre-dawn darkness as I wheeled my suitcase to the curb, my camera bag slung across my shoulder like a bandolier of artistic ammunition. Prague beckoned from across the Atlantic, promising photographic opportunities that would silence skeptics and validate the dreams Michael had dismissed so casually. The driver, a kind-faced woman about my own age, smiled approvingly at my obvious excitement. "Big adventure?" she asked, and I nodded, unable to suppress the grin that had been building since yesterday's confrontation. The contest deadline had transformed from burden into gift. 3 weeks to prove that passion transcended birthdays and artistic vision improved with experience. Michael's sleeping house disappeared in the rear window as we drove toward the airport, taking his limitations and expectations with it into the fading darkness. O'Hare Airport hummed with pre-dawn energy, travelers from every generation pursuing business deals, family visits, romantic getaways, and personal adventures without anyone questioning their age appropriateness. I moved through security with confident efficiency, my travel experience predating the TSA by several decades. The photography equipment drew respectful questions from airport staff who recognized professional-grade lenses and appreciated the artistic mission they represented. My gate area filled gradually with fellow Prague-bound passengers, young backpackers with guidebooks, business travelers with laptops, families with excited children, and several other solo travelers whose ages spanned every decade from 20s to 80s. The diversity felt validating, a real-world contradiction to Michael's narrative about elderly women staying safely home with supervised activities. Margaret's text message arrived perfectly timed. "Prague awaits. Remember, the best photographs come from the heart, not the birth certificate." The boarding announcement crackled through speakers as I gathered my carry-on, preparing to cross an ocean in defiance of my son's pronouncements about age-appropriate limitations. The aircraft door represented a threshold between his expectations and my reality, between safety and adventure, between the woman he wanted me to be and the photographer I was determined to become. Prague's golden spires pierced the autumn morning like exclamation points against a pewter sky, the city's ancient beauty immediately justifying every dollar Michael had questioned and every risk he'd catalogued during our confrontation. The taxi ride from the airport wound through cobblestone streets that had witnessed centuries of visitors, artists, revolutionaries, and dreamers, their ages irrelevant to history's grand narrative. My hotel room overlooked the Vltava River, the view framed perfectly for the kind of architectural photography that had always moved me to tears. The contest guidelines encouraged cultural connection through visual storytelling, exactly the kind of challenge that made my photographer's heart race with possibility. I unpacked my camera equipment with ceremonial reverence, each lens and filter representing tools that would capture images my son considered impossible for someone my age. The afternoon light slanted through Gothic towers and Baroque facades, creating shadows and highlights that whispered stories to anyone patient enough to listen. Prague's streets beckoned beyond my window, promising 3 weeks of photographic opportunities that would either validate my rebellion or provide Michael with ammunition for future interventions about aging mothers who overestimated their capabilities. Either way, I'd chosen adventure over safety, dreams over limitation, independence over supervised decline. The first photograph I captured was Charles Bridge at sunrise, its ancient stones glowing amber in the early light, while early commuters and vendors prepared for another day of centuries-old routines. The image contained layers of meaning that Michael's spreadsheets couldn't quantify: human resilience, architectural permanence, the passage of time that enhanced rather than diminished beauty. An elderly street musician tuned his violin nearby, his weathered hands moving with skill that age had refined rather than weakened. I photographed him with permission, his face lined with stories that younger subjects couldn't possibly tell. The morning progressed with discovery after discovery: hidden courtyards where golden light pooled like honey, market vendors whose animated gestures transcended language barriers, children feeding swans while grandparents watched with patient smiles. Each frame contradicted my son's assumptions about aging and capability, building a visual argument for adventure that no amount of patronizing concern could refute. The camera felt like an extension of my vision, 68 years of accumulated experience informing composition choices that younger photographers might miss. Prague's beauty demanded documentation, and I was finally free to answer that call without anyone's permission except my own courage and determination. Days blended into a rhythm of exploration, documentation, and discovery that felt more natural than any supervised activity Michael had suggested for my golden years. I navigated Prague's public transportation system with growing confidence, my language app bridging communication gaps while pointing and smiling handled the rest. The photography workshops I'd attended in suburban community centers had prepared me well for technical challenges, but nothing had prepared me for the emotional impact of pursuing dreams without family approval or social expectations. Local photographers welcomed me into their informal networks, sharing location secrets and lighting tips with the generous spirit that transcends age, nationality, and language barriers. My hotel room's walls gradually filled with printed contact sheets, visual evidence of productivity that would astonish skeptics back home. The contest's submission requirements took shape naturally, 25 images that told Prague's story through my seasoned perspective, each photograph a small rebellion against assumptions about elderly limitations. Margaret's daily encouragement texts provided emotional support, while Michael's worried voicemails revealed his growing anxiety about my extended silence. The distance between Prague and his disapproval felt liberating, like shedding clothes that had never fit properly anyway. Week 2 brought technical challenges that tested every skill I'd developed during my photography education. Capturing the Northern Lights' ethereal dance during a weekend trip to Iceland, negotiating with suspicious border guards who questioned an elderly American woman traveling alone with expensive camera equipment. Each obstacle overcome added layers of confidence that couldn't be taught in assisted living facilities or gained through age-appropriate activities. The contest deadline approached like a finish line I was actually prepared to cross, my portfolio growing stronger with each passing day. Fellow travelers shared stories and meals without once questioning whether I was too old for independent adventures, their acceptance a sharp contrast to my son's protective concerns. The photographs accumulating on my memory cards told stories that Michael's financial spreadsheets couldn't contain: human dignity that transcended age, beauty that required experience to fully appreciate, adventures that belonged to anyone brave enough to pursue them. Prague's winter light provided dramatic shadows that younger eyes might miss, architectural details that emerged only through patient observation, street life that revealed itself to persistent documentation. My camera captured not just images, but proof of capabilities that my son had dismissed, visual evidence of dreams that refused to accept expiration dates. The breakthrough image came during my 3rd week, a spontaneous street portrait of 3 generations of Czech women sharing bread in a small cafe. Their faces told stories spanning 8 decades of European history, from wars survived to freedoms won to traditions preserved through changing times. The grandmother's weathered hands broke bread with the same grace her granddaughter used to feed her infant daughter. The cycle of care and nurturing continuing across generations without concern for age-appropriate limitations. I captured their interaction with telephoto discretion, the resulting image containing emotional depth that technical perfection couldn't achieve. The women noticed my photography and invited me to join their table, their broken English mixing with my tourist Czech to create conversation that transcended language barriers. They laughed at my stories about overprotective children, sharing their own experiences with family members who confused care with control. The afternoon stretched into evening as we shared coffee and pastries, their acceptance of my solo adventure providing validation that Michael's concerns were cultural rather than practical. The photograph from that encounter would become the centerpiece of my contest submission, an image that proved artistic vision improved with experience rather than diminishing with age. Michael's increasingly frantic voicemails provided entertainment during my final Prague evenings, his worried tone shifting from patronizing authority to genuine concern as my extended silence challenged his assumptions about helpless elderly mothers. I deliberately avoided contact to prove a point about independence, but his latest message carried notes of actual fear rather than just disapproval. Sarah's background whispers suggested she was moderating his responses, probably preventing even more dramatic interventions like international missing person reports or emergency embassy contacts. My daily photo posts on social media told a story of competent navigation through foreign cities, successful cultural exchanges, and artistic productivity that my son's warnings had suggested were impossible for someone my age. The portfolio taking shape in my hotel room represented more than contest submission material. It was visual proof that dreams had no expiration date, that experience enhanced rather than limited artistic vision, that age was irrelevant to adventure when coupled with preparation and determination. The flight home carried mixed emotions as Prague's spires disappeared beneath clouds, 3 weeks of independence and artistic achievement giving way to inevitable confrontation with family members who'd spent my absence imagining disasters that never materialized. My camera bags bulged with memory cards containing thousands of images, visual evidence of capabilities Michael had dismissed, and adventures he'd considered impossible for elderly women. The contest submission deadline waited just 48 hours away, requiring final image selection and artist statement composition that would either validate my rebellion or provide ammunition for future interventions. Fellow passengers included several photographers returning from European assignments, their casual acceptance of my professional equipment and artistic mission, a stark contrast to my son's skeptical concerns about age-appropriate activities. The airplane's recycled air couldn't diminish my satisfaction at proving wrong every assumption about declining capabilities and increasing limitations. Prague had tested every skill I'd developed and revealed reserves of strength I'd forgotten I possessed, adventures that belonged to anyone brave enough to pursue them, regardless of birth year or family approval. Michael's voicemails awaited my attention like unexploded ordnance. 3 weeks of accumulated worry and disapproval that would soon collide with evidence of my successful independence. Chicago's skyline emerged through airplane windows as familiar and foreign as my relationship with Michael. The city unchanged, while everything about my perspective had shifted during 3 weeks of European adventure. O'Hare Airport's controlled chaos felt manageable after navigating Prague's ancient streets and Icelandic weather, my confidence transformed by proof of capabilities my son had questioned. The taxi ride home provided time to process the transformation that had occurred during my absence, adventure replacing anxiety while independence overcame the fear that had paralyzed me since Robert's death. My house appeared smaller somehow, as if the walls had contracted while my world expanded beyond the limitations Michael had tried to impose through financial spreadsheets and assisted living brochures. The contest submission materials lay ready on my desk, requiring only final image selection and uploaded files to complete the challenge that had begun with dinner table confrontation. Margaret's excited text message provided perfect timing. Welcome home. Can't wait to hear everything and see your amazing photographs. The photography community's support felt more valuable than family approval, validation from people who understood that creativity transcended birthdays and artistic vision improved with experience. Michael's car wasn't in my driveway, probably a strategic absence designed to give both of us time to prepare for conversations that would determine our relationship's future direction. The house felt different somehow, charged with possibility rather than weighted with expectations about appropriate activities for aging mothers. The contest submission process consumed my first evening home. 25 carefully selected images that told Prague's story through my experienced perspective, uploaded with artist's statement that served as manifesto about aging, adventure, and artistic vision. Each photograph represented small rebellion against assumptions about elderly limitations, visual proof that passion transcended practical concerns about age-appropriate activities. The breakthrough portrait of 3 generations sharing bread became the portfolio's centerpiece, an image that captured human dignity and cultural continuity with emotional depth that technical perfection couldn't achieve. Margaret's evening visit provided perfect timing. Her excitement at seeing my European photographs validating every risk I'd taken and every assumption I'd challenged during 3 weeks of independence. We spread contact sheets across my dining room table, the same surface where Michael had attempted his intervention, transforming the space from courtroom to gallery with artistic evidence that spoke louder than any argument. The contest's judging criteria focused on technical excellence and emotional impact, measurements that had nothing to do with photographers' age or family approval ratings. Margaret's professional assessment confirmed what I'd hoped. The portfolio represented my best work, images that justified every dollar Michael had questioned and every risk he'd enumerated during our confrontation. The submission confirmation email arrived at midnight, digital proof that dreams pursued with determination could overcome any obstacle except the dreamer's own surrender to others' expectations. Morning brought Michael's inevitable visit, his expression cycling through relief, frustration, and grudging admiration as he surveyed the visual evidence of my successful European adventure. The dining room walls displayed my favorite Prague photographs, transforming our family space into gallery that contradicted every assumption about aging limitations and elderly capabilities. His carefully prepared lecture about responsible behavior dissolved when confronted with obvious proof of competent navigation through foreign cities, successful cultural exchanges, and artistic productivity that exceeded his pessimistic predictions. Sarah's genuine excitement at seeing my photographs provided emotional support that helped bridge the gap between her husband's worry and my validation seeking, her marketing background immediately recognizing the portfolio's professional quality. Tommy's unfiltered enthusiasm for Grandma's super cool pictures cut through adult tensions with innocent appreciation that reminded everyone why art mattered more than age. The contest submission confirmation lay prominently displayed, digital evidence that I'd transformed dinner table confrontation into international adventure without requiring anyone's permission except my own courage. Michael's financial spreadsheets seemed absurd when compared to my documented 3 weeks of independence, his assisted living brochures laughably irrelevant when faced with proof of continued vitality. The conversation that followed would either repair our relationship or establish new boundaries based on respect rather than patronizing protection. "I can't believe you actually did it," Michael admitted, his voice carrying mixture of admiration and exasperation that perfectly captured our complicated relationship dynamics. The photographs surrounding us provided visual testimony that contradicted every concern he'd raised about elderly women traveling alone with expensive equipment. His protective instincts had been proven unnecessary, his financial analysis irrelevant to adventures that justified every questioned expense through documented success. Sarah's supportive comments about my incredible bravery helped moderate her husband's adjustment to evidence that challenged his assumptions about aging parents and appropriate activities. Tommy examined each photograph with 6-year-old intensity, asking detailed questions about Prague's architecture and Icelandic landscapes that proved children understood adventure better than overprotective adults. The dining room felt different with my photographs displayed, transformed from site of intervention to celebration of capabilities that refused limitation by birth year or family expectations. Michael's admission represented the first crack in his certainty about elderly limitations, opening space for relationship renegotiation based on demonstrated competence rather than assumed decline. The contest deadline had forced action that arguments couldn't achieve, proving capability through deed rather than defending dreams through discussion. Emma's delighted babbling provided soundtrack to family reconciliation, her innocent joy reminding everyone that celebration was more appropriate than criticism when dreams were pursued successfully despite obstacles and opposition. The phone call from a globally renowned travel magazine arrived exactly 6 weeks after my contest submission. The editor's excited voice explaining that my Prague portfolio had been selected as the grand prize winner. $25,000 and a featured spread in one of the world's most prestigious publications validated every risk I'd taken and every assumption I'd challenged during my 3 weeks of European adventure. Michael's expression as I shared the news cycled through disbelief, pride, and grudging acceptance that his aging mother had achieved something extraordinary despite his protective concerns. Sarah's marketing expertise immediately recognized the career implications of such recognition, her enthusiasm helping bridge the gap between her husband's shock and my validation-seeking celebration. The editor's description of my mature perspective bringing unique emotional depth to traditional travel photography felt like professional vindication of arguments I'd made about experience enhancing rather than limiting artistic vision. Margaret's arrival with champagne provided perfect timing, her photography community connections having already spread news of my unexpected victory through networks of creative professionals who understood that age was irrelevant to artistic achievement. Tommy's declaration that Grandma was famous now captured the family's adjustment to my sudden transformation from declining elderly relative to internationally recognized photographer. The feature article would include behind-the-scenes stories about my solo European adventure, inspiring other seniors to pursue dreams that family members might consider age-inappropriate or impractical. The magazine spread appeared 3 months later, 6 glossy pages showcasing my Prague photographs with accompanying article titled, "Age of Vision: How Life Experience Enhances Artistic Perspective." The breakthrough portrait of 3 generations sharing bread graced the opening spread, its emotional depth drawing reader comments that praised the wisdom in the photographer's eye and mature understanding of human dignity. Michael's office colleagues had apparently seen the magazine before he did, their congratulations forcing him to confront his mother's achievement through external validation rather than family dynamics. The article's mention of my bold decision to pursue international travel photography at 68 positioned my adventure as inspirational rather than reckless, contradicting every assumption about age-appropriate limitations. Sarah's social media posts about her amazing mother-in-law helped bridge family relationships strained by protective concerns and independence assertions. The magazine's letters to the editor section filled with responses from seniors inspired by my story, their adventures ranging from motorcycle trips to art school enrollment to international volunteering. Margaret's community center class used my success as motivation for their own creative pursuits, proof that recognition could come at any age when talent met determination and opportunity. Tommy's show-and-tell presentation about his grandmother's magazine spread made him the most popular kid in first grade for exactly 1 week. His innocent pride helping heal family wounds created by adult disagreements about aging and capability. The assisted living brochure disappeared from Michael's briefcase, replaced by travel magazines and photography workshop catalogs as he researched ways to support rather than limit my newfound career. His protective instincts evolved into logistical assistance, helping plan photography expeditions that satisfied both his safety concerns and my adventure requirements. The financial spreadsheets that had once documented my supposed irresponsibility now tracked income from magazine sales, workshop teaching, and commission work that exceeded his original predictions about retirement limitations. Sarah's marketing expertise proved invaluable for building my photography business, her social media strategies transforming my international magazine recognition into ongoing professional opportunities. The dining room's family photos expanded to include my Prague exhibition. The magazine spread framed beside decades of birthday parties and graduation ceremonies as permanent testament to dreams achieved despite obstacles. Michael's evolution from protective skeptic to proud supporter provided the most satisfying victory, proving that relationships could change when evidence contradicted assumptions about aging and capability. Tommy's friends began requesting photography lessons from his famous grandmother, their innocent enthusiasm a reminder that teaching could extend artistic legacy beyond personal achievement. The contest that had begun as rebellion against family limitations had transformed into career renaissance that justified every risk taken and every assumption challenged during my 3 weeks of European independence and self-discovery. 6 months after my victory, the photography workshop business was thriving with students ranging from teenagers to octogenarians, all united by passion that transcended age barriers and social expectations. Michael's complete transformation from protective skeptic to business manager provided daily proof that assumptions could evolve when confronted with undeniable evidence of capability and success. The assisted living facility brochures had been replaced by international travel itineraries as we planned photography expeditions that satisfied both his safety concerns and my adventure requirements. Sarah's marketing expertise had built my online presence into a platform that reached thousands of aspiring photographers who found inspiration in late-blooming success stories. The dining room that had once hosted my intervention now served as gallery space where students examined my Prague portfolio, their questions and enthusiasm validating every dollar Michael had initially questioned. Margaret's friendship deepened as we taught workshops together, her 73-year-old perspective combining with my 68 years of experience to provide instruction that emphasized creativity over chronological limitations. Tommy's pride in his famous grandmother had evolved into genuine interest in photography, his 6-year-old compositions showing promise that age was truly irrelevant to artistic vision. The magazine spread remained prominently displayed, serving as daily reminder that dreams pursued with determination could overcome any obstacle except the dreamer's own surrender to others' expectations about appropriate activities and aging gracefully within prescribed boundaries. The second contest entry was already taking shape, this time documenting seniors pursuing adventures that society considered age inappropriate. A photo essay that would challenge assumptions while celebrating the vitality that transcends birthdays. Michael's complete support for my latest project provided the most satisfying evidence that relationships could change when protective love learned to express itself through empowerment rather than limitation. My camera bag sat packed and ready by the front door, destination tags for next month's expedition to document senior surfers in Hawaii, proof that dreams had no expiration date when coupled with preparation and determination. The phone rang regularly with interview requests from magazines wanting to feature my story. Each conversation an opportunity to inspire others who'd accepted limitations imposed by family concerns or social expectations. Sarah's business development skills had transformed my international recognition into a comprehensive photography career, her enthusiasm helping bridge generational gaps that had once seemed insurmountable. Tommy's bedtime requests for Prague adventure stories provided the perfect ending to days filled with teaching, creating, and proving that age was just a number when passion met opportunity. The dining room table where Michael had once spread financial documents now hosted lesson plans for international photography workshops. Our relationship transformed from protective control to collaborative support. Emma's delighted clapping whenever she saw my magazine provided innocent validation that recognition could come at any age, while Michael's proud introductions of his internationally published photographer mother proved that assumptions could evolve when evidence demanded revision of previously held beliefs about aging, capability, and dreams that refused to accept expiration dates imposed by well-meaning but misguided family members who confused protection with limitation. Months passed, and what had begun as a quiet rebellion over lasagna became a full-fledged renaissance. My photographs traveled further than I ever dreamed, featured in galleries and shared in online communities where strangers wrote to say my work had inspired them to dust off forgotten passions. Each letter or message reminded me that one woman's refusal to shrink quietly into the background could ripple outward, encouraging others to live boldly regardless of age. Michael adjusted more quickly than I expected, trading his lectures for questions, his spreadsheets for travel maps. He started attending workshops, not as an organizer but as a student, camera in hand, humbling himself to learn from the mother he once doubted. Watching him kneel on cobblestones to capture Prague's shadows years later, I realized the story had come full circle. My journey had not just reclaimed my independence, it had reshaped my family's future. Sarah, always the bridge between us, blossomed into a partner in the business, her marketing acumen turning our small circle of students into an international community. Emma grew into a toddler who clapped whenever she saw me lift my camera, believing photography was simply another language her grandmother spoke fluently. Tommy, inspired by his show-and-tell fame, became my shadow on weekend shoots, his questions reminding me that curiosity has no age limit either. Our family dinners shifted in tone. No more folders of financial statements, no more cold lasagna stiffened by silence, but laughter, plans, and discussions of where my lens might point next. The mahogany table that once staged my trial became instead the place where dreams were mapped, where hope replaced fear, and where Michael finally learned that love is not control, it is trust. When I stood before a crowd at a senior creativity symposium a year later, I told them the truth that had carried me from my dining room to the cobblestones of Europe. Age is not a cage, but a compass. Every wrinkle, every loss, every year lived, sharpens the eye and strengthens the heart. The applause that followed wasn't just for my photographs, but for every person in that room who had been told, "You're too old," and refused to listen. I thought of Robert then, his voice echoing in memory, urging me to chase what we once postponed. His absence hurt, but his words had become the wind beneath every journey I took. And as I packed my camera for yet another trip, this time to capture the golden surf of Hawaii's shores, I smiled at the simple, undeniable truth my son had finally accepted. Dreams have no expiration date.